Hey, everybody. Good morning. Hope you're doing well. And it looks like I'm off a little bit in my color here, so bear with me as I get make a few adjustments. I hope you're doing good. Hope you're having a great day. And I am just wrapping up one or two things here, so I'm going to go on mute for 1 second while we hopefully get a few people to come in. But I've got one or two more things to do, and then we'll get started. So bear with me just one more minute. Thank you. Again, for anyone just joining, we'll get started in about 1 minute. So good morning, everybody. I hope you're doing well and appreciate your patience with me. And just had a few other things to wrap up here this morning, but I'm so glad to be with you. And I hope you're doing well. I'm going to just mention a few quick things before we get started and jump in the deep end. Number one, I wanted to mention that I am doing peer-to-peer support meetings. If anybody's interested in doing that, we can find a time that works for you. Just reach out to me through my Facebook page, preferably through Messenger. My handle there is Harmonic Tim. And that's a great place for me because I can put a face to a name. But also, if you don't use Facebook, feel free to reach out to me by email. My email address is HarmonicAtheist@yahoo.com. And again, there's just a little bit of little paperwork to fill out just for a second, and then we'll find a time that works for you. And love to meet with you. Love to be able to be a help. I feel like a lot of people are telling me that at this point, there's just so much that this community is doing that's really helping us across the board, and I really want to be part of that. I really want to be, able to make a big difference for people. I love the ways that there's so much. It feels like there's so much kindness and love, sort of just blowing through this community across the board, and it makes such a difference to me. It's been a major help to me. It's been a major impact on my life. So I appreciate you all so much. In terms of the other stuff, I want to mention that if anybody's interested in doing an interview, please reach out to me. Again, same way, Facebook preference is the preference. And then certainly we can also do it through email, HarmonicAtheist@yahoo.com. I'm looking for people who are willing to sort of partner with me to help me be able to continue this work. If anyone's able to support the channel, all the ways beneath the video, or you can certainly reach out to me if you want to talk about it separately. But I really do need support to do this. I believe it's worth it. I believe it's helping. I believe a lot of people are seeing a difference in what we're doing, and that we're going to be hopefully in this for the long run and able to make a difference long term. I really do believe in what we're doing. I really, really do. And I hope that, over time that we can find that this is just blowing us away. So anyway, wanted to get started with a few things. Wanted to mention today is just for this topic at the moment is going to be just comments. But I'm thinking I've had a few people talk to me about this topic that I brought up here today, and I think we're going to move toward it being also a live stream where people can jump in. So we're going to bring this topic back up very shortly, probably within the next few days, to be honest. We'll probably bring it up pretty quickly because I do think that it's probably worth it to have everybody be able to jump in. But I'm going to share quite a bit of things today on my heart. I hope it helps. I'm not going to go quickly necessarily, so it may be something to put on in the background. I am going to keep it child friendly. So if you have kids in the house, it'll be safe to listen to around them. But I do want to make sure that I cover a bunch of things, and I do think that some of these things are going to be very, very helpful. So anyway, number one, just want to say thank you as well to those of you who have been talking with me about your parenthood. I've had a lot of people reach out to me recently, so I'm just getting a few of my notes together here. Had a few people reach out to me about this topic in different ways over the last week or two, and it seems like it's on everybody's mind. How do we move past some of the harder parts of what what's happened to our kids, and how do we bless them in ways that are just truly categorically different than what we went through as kids. And for so many of us, that is priority number one. We want to get to a point where we're saying, I am not going to do to my kids what was done to me, and I'm going to make sure that they have a very, very, very different experience and a very different model. And to just to know that that's what we're aiming at is so precious to me. I have 4 little kids, and I've actually got a little treat for you. I'm going to play it twice. I'm going to play it once here as we get started, and then I'm going to play it once more at the end. Sort of, I think it'd be a good way to wrap up our time. But I'm going to play this for you, and then we'll get started with my notes. Today we loved each other well. Today we loved each other well. Loved each other well. Loved each other well. Today we loved each other well. Today we blessed each other well. Today we blessed each other well. Blessed each other well. Blessed each other well. Today we blessed each other well. Today we forgave each other well. Today we forgave each other well. Forgave each other well. Forgave each other well. Today we forgave each other well. Today we laughed together well. Today we laughed together well. Laughed together well. Laughed together well. Today we laughed together well. Today we loved each other well. Today we loved each other well. Loved each other well. Loved each other well. Today we loved each other well. So thank you for letting me share that. I hope that was a good way to start your day. It feels like that's a good example of what my life is like with them. Although there's certainly a lot of normal rough times with kids, of course, in the sense that they sometimes get cranky, they sometimes don't get enough sleep, and so you got to do what you can to just love on them through it all. But adjust myself a little bit here. So thank you so much, HVAC. Appreciate your encouragement. It really means the world to me. Hey, Philip. Yeah, we'll get into that dysregulated real soon. Yeah, it may not be the right word for it, but I think it's a word that's used a lot in the child psychology. So I wanted to just bring it in here, but we'll redefine it in different ways that are easier to wrap our minds around. Thank you, Shell. Appreciate it so much. And yes, because people that aren't tied to a book care about other people's success in life. Religious people only care about conforming to the book. Yeah. When about 2 in 10 kids is neurodivergent, the church preys upon our insecurity as parents of neurodivergent children. That's what Strong-Willed Child targeted. Yeah, thank you, James Dobson. Thank you so much. Anyway, so what I wanted to start with is just thinking through the fact that for so many of us, one of the hardest shifts that we go through are these ordinary moments where we realize that when a child does something that displeases us, we are misinterpreting it. A child's going to fall down and scream. Maybe they fall apart over a cup that's spilled. A child gets real upset because you're telling them what to do. They melt down after you're at the store or something. Older kids are going to get upset over homework. They drag their feet in different ways. Sometimes they stare at you with these eyes that are almost in tears, but not quite. They're certainly at times full of strain. And I think a lot of us go through these transitions where something inside of us simply breaks open. We realize something else is going on. And you think to yourself, maybe I read this wrong. Maybe I'm looking at this the wrong way. Maybe I learned in childhood, as I went through struggles as a child, that maybe there were some of these categories of interpreting a child's behavior that were too harsh or maybe too moralized. Maybe we were trained inside of a worldview and a faith that said anytime a kid seems to be disobeying or is overwhelmed, that is in fact a form of rebellion. They need to obey immediately, quickly, with a good attitude, and with absolutely no deviation from that. And so anything that was considered disrespectful was an opportunity for you to basically bring out your ability to bring it all back to God. That if they can learn to obey you, then they can learn to obey God. But when you realize that that's not what's going on, it sort of cuts you open and you start seeing it everywhere. You start seeing how many of us as adults were trained to look at children this way through very suspicious and accusing eyes. And how many homes were there out there where instant compliance is everything? It's worth far more to many parents than understanding your child's heart. And we were handled a bunch of psychology, like Jim Dobson, a bunch of loaded words, and we were told to use them and to interpret everything that we did in parenting through it. Um, any way that we could say the child was rebelling or being manipulative, being selfish, all the above. If your child was in pain, if your child was an overload, if your child was confused, maybe dealing with shame, even just simple immaturity, that could get sort of swept right under the rug in a heartbeat. And you just say, nope, that's a form of sin. It's a form of rebellion and wickedness. And the shift that is so critical for us, I think, is to say, as deconverted people, we acknowledge that children can be going through some really difficult times and call it dysregulated, but they're not in a spot where they're feeling safe and they're feeling healthy. They're not feeling like everything is set up for them to thrive. To say to yourself, that is not a wicked child. It is a child, a dysregulated child is a child whose nervous system or emotions or thinking are struggling to regain some kind of safety. They want connection. They want some kind of control. They feel powerless. They feel like their autonomy and agency is depleted and gone. They feel shackled. They feel like they're in fight or flight. And when you as a parent begin to realize that's what's happening, it changes everything. So I just want to go through a couple of these points that are, I think, important. Again, I'm going to go through them very slowly, so this may take a while. Don't feel like you got to stay for the whole thing. You're welcome to stay as long as your schedule allows, and then certainly, watch the rest of it. I know that sometimes some of these that are longer can take a while to really go through it, but I hope you will either watch it all or go back to it. I think the first thing I want to say is that our faith, our worldview really taught us to moralize the struggle. We came from a view and a setting where children were viewed almost like everything was suspicious. I mean, I distinctly remember listening to a Jim Dobson radio program where he had someone on who was had claimed to be a former police detective or something. And this man came on to Jim Dobson's show and said, children are basically criminals that aren't yet adults. Like they're criminals in the making because their hearts are so whatever, deceitful, wicked, ready to be angry. And so we would look for it, even when kids were just broken and torn up, or they were crying. Everything. They could be showing disrespect, but have a strained voice right in front of us. It was always like there's some kind of inner corruption that's at the heart of this. And we weren't looking at the fact that the child could be hungry or overloaded or tired or dealing with some kind of fear, maybe of us, fear of the discipline that's coming, or maybe they're just confused. Maybe they're overwhelmed either by that particular moment or just developmentally they're overwhelmed. Some kids are very sensory sensitive. And so it could be something like that. Maybe there's loud noises and you didn't realize it. Maybe you're used to loud noises, but to them, they have a migraine headache because they're so used to, or they're so sensitive to the loud noises or lights. And maybe they have a trigger that they're not able to yet identify clearly and say, this is what, when this happens, this is how I respond. They don't have the words for that yet. But the adult lens that we bring to it just keeps on coming, bringing the whole scene back to an issue of guilt. You're guilty, you're guilty, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad. And I'm going to read a couple of comments here from Michelle. There are issues with sensory integration in neurodivergent children. It is harder for the sympathetic nervous system to go into a rested state. Things feel like threats even when they're not. Yeah, well said. You can't punish a disability out of a child. It requires teaching, coping mechanisms, and strategies. Praying it away or disciplining the child will never work. Yeah, well said. Very well said. We end up at that point when we're bringing everything back to an issue of guilt. You're guilty, you're bad, you're disobedient. We end up basically distorting their whole personality in our minds, and that comes out in how we treat them. We have said, again, the whole thing is about guilt. We're not just dealing with this issue, we're dealing with their whole life. You've trained yourself, and your parents have trained you, your church has trained you to confuse a child's current state, which might be, granted, annoying you or disobedient, but to say that that's them, that's the whole of them is just bad, bad, bad. That's their character. A frightened child can be seen as a bad child. An overloaded child is a bad child. A child with frustration is a weak child, is a bad child. An immature child is a bad child. A child in distress is a bad child. All of it. It's all evidence. And it's not evidence that they're bad. It's evidence that they're developmentally struggling. And a lot of us are coming to a point of saying, yeah, I see that now. I see that now. The lens that we had made us feel like we were doing the right thing for God, made us almost feel righteous, like I am leading them in the way they should go. And when they're old, they will not depart from it. And I'm making sure that I'm not sparing the child and sparing the rod and spoiling the child. You get to a point when you really think through this and you step back from the edge, you get to a point where you say, I am, as a parent, actually doing real harm. And you realize you've tricked yourself, and your authority figures in a sense have tricked you, but being severe in your mind makes you feel somehow loving because you're doing it God's way. And you're often saying, I want instant compliance with a good attitude. And that's the highest good in the room. That's the highest goal. You're heroic if your child is able to drown out their fears and their shame and their confusion and their overload. They just push it aside and say, yes, ma'am, yes, sir. I'm happy, happy, happy all the time. You feel like you've somehow won the day and you've done the godly thing. And yet your children right in front of you, they're needy. But because they stop looking like that, they stop looking like they're, to you, they're not someone that needs guidance and help and support. They're someone that's a problem to conquer. That's so much of it is you're a sin problem to fix, ultimately through the cross, but directly in the situation through my parenting, through my discipline. And instead of you saying, what's going on inside this child's heart, you're saying, how do I win this? How do I beat them into submission, either literally or metaphorically? Instead of saying, what skill set is missing here between their skill set for coping or my skill set for observing and equipping them, you start asking yourself, how do I just crush this? How do I crush it so quickly? You're not asking yourself, what just happened in their nervous system? You're simply saying, how dare you? And you've moved from interpreting the situation to accusing them. And you're no longer focused mostly on caring for them. You're mostly concerned about controlling them. You don't want to teach. You want to prove your point and prove that you're in charge. And it's important to admit to ourselves that we're failing at some of the most basic questions. Instead of saying, let me be a good investigator here. What is this behavior telling me? You're saying, how fast can I get this child to get back in line? And when you do that, you're missing arguably almost everything that really matters. You might be missing the fact that they're hungry. They're tired. Maybe they didn't get enough sleep. I mean, sometimes I think to myself, literally, it's as simple as I put enough blankets on them last night, and somehow in the middle of their sleep, they kicked them off and they slept. I try to check on my kids every night, at least once, to make sure that they're still covered up. But maybe at some point they kicked their blankets off and you didn't know to check it, and you thought they were totally fine, totally warm enough. They kicked their blankets off, and so they didn't quite get as good sleep. They laid there thinking I'm cold, but they didn't wake themselves up enough to pull the blankets a little bit higher. Maybe they're covered from their waist down, but they didn't pull them back up over the shoulder. They didn't sleep as well simply because they kicked their blankets off. You missed the red flag. They're just tired. A lot of us miss the sensory overloads. That sensory overload is so big in our world right now. Sometimes there's transitions that occur. I mean, especially in a divorce and custody situation like many of us have, but other transitions into school, out of school, transitions from spring break, which some of us are in right now, to, when you go back, transitions of all sorts, transitions of friends that come and go, family members that come and go, all kinds of issues. There's attachment distress. Again, there might be deficits just in the skill set where they don't understand how to do something. And so young kids when they're under these stresses, when they're dysregulated, when they're under some kind of strain and pressure, they're not going to look graceful. They're not going to look graceful. They're going to look clumsy. They're going to look disobedient. They're going to look upset. And that's when we as parents tend, unfortunately, to let ourselves say the tenderness and the graciousness and the kindness and the understanding. We're just going to let it go. We're going to let it go. Read any comments here real quick here. Religion says you're not okay as you are and you're not safe. This is put on parents' shoulders. It's terrifying to think I needed to train my child up so they wouldn't burn. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and in so many ways, a lot of child discipline was really, when you look at it, it's a way of preparing the kids to obey you so that they can be prepared to obey God. If you bow your knee to your human parent, then you'll be much more equipped to bow your knee to your heavenly parent. And the discipline of your human parent is so small compared to the discipline of your heavenly parent. So let's go through a few beatings here, so that you don't get the biggest beating of all, of course, which is hell. It's very, very sad and sadistic. I could never live up to expectations as a child, and when my oldest turned out neurodivergent as well, I could not put her through what I went through as a child. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we our eyes really open up so much. So here, you can't punish a disability of a child. I don't understand. It's not an indirect reference to the doctrine of original sin? Is it baffled? There's ways in which, well, Shell says, disabilities like ADHD and autism often present as behavioral issues, but it's not something the child can help. They're not being sinful. They need extra help. Yeah, it's just understanding the context of where they're coming from. What are they struggling with? Exactly. But again, this is where, and I'm still on my first point here. But just I'm unpacking this very slowly because I think it's worth it. This is a big deal to me. This is front and center of my mind, because I've got 4 beautiful children that I'm trying to be a good parent for. Trying to love them the way that meet them where they're at. But when you treat a child with this pattern where they're needing help and you're there to just basically berate them, they feel that interpretation. They feel the shift in the room. They feel that you're more interested in giving this, judgment, this verdict. You're bad. They understand that you want compliance and that you're not that fussed about understanding where they're coming from. And, one of the biggest things for me is literally going over when you notice this and you pick it up, you see a child kind of turn their back or, not quite cry, but they've got like that pre-tears mode in their face. Is just go over and give them a little, little back rub and say, hey, can we talk about this? Let's talk it through. What are you thinking? What's on your mind? Quiet yourself down, quiet your tone, and just let them know this is a safe conversation. This is not a situation where I am aiming to find some way to discipline you. I'm aiming to find some way to take away something that means something to you. No, I'm here to be your friend. I'm here to care. I'm not just your friend, of course. I am your parent, but I am also your friend. I'm someone that cares about the human journey. And just because, so often we're talking more about it on the adult level here, I think it's important to say just as much that our ability to understand our human journey at the adult level helps us go back and say, how did you need to be parented yourself as a kid? Well, let's do that for them. We need to be interested in asking, what hurt you? What's frightening you? What's overwhelming you? And what pressures are you facing? They don't know the words for this, but you find the creative ways on their level, at their age level, to say, what are the pressures that you're seeing? Did something happen at school today that hurt you? Maybe a teacher was really upset at them. Maybe a fellow student said something mean to them. And that one small moment that you didn't even perhaps know about became like a breaking point. And now they're hurt. Now they're upset. And now they're willing to throw a toy across the room. Or they're upset if you don't let them watch a certain show. And you have to look past the facade to what's really going on. Doesn't mean you excuse all kinds of crazy stuff. It doesn't mean you let them abuse the other children. Doesn't mean you let them hit each other. But it does mean you say, I want to understand what's really going on. Because, our Christian subculture and a lot of religious subcultures, I think, have been training parents to see the children through this lens of obedience and sin and doctrine, as opposed to through a developmental lens. And for a lot of us, this was like dumped into that whole psychology, that secular psychology stuff. They don't need psychology. You don't need to understand their development level. You need to understand they're little sinners. The sin issue is the issue. It's like, it's not. And that's where deconversion and deconstruction is such a beautiful process, because it gives you the chance for the first time to get over that, to say, no, we're not going to interpret children that way anymore. I'm not here to break your will. I'm not here to subdue your spirit. And I'm not here to say, you must prove your obedience to me. Jump through the following 10 hoops. I'm not here to moralize your struggle. But when if we don't see it that way, then all this stuff, you see them as little corrupt micro demons, You see, you're constantly saying how you're faking it. You're manipulating, trying to manipulate me as a parent. Like, no, children, I don't think most children, especially at their younger 8 years, can put those pieces together. They certainly learn a little bit of some tricks of the trade that all children know. But more often than not, in my experience, children who behave these ways have very much unsafe context and a nervous system that's just frankly overloaded. And when the children become labeled as the problem, you're truly like you are the problem through and through, then these issues just get worse, because now they're dealing with the original fight or flight, they're dealing with the original dysregulation, but now they're having also to deal with this chronic sense of I'm bad, this chronic correction of stop it, the chronic pressure and the shame, perhaps private shame, but even sometimes in some families public shame, and the tension that's there, and just the exhausting labor of constantly trying as a child to stay good every hour of the day. And all the while, your whole lens as a parent is focused on you are defective. And that's the only direction that your theological lens knows how to point. That is a brutal way to read a child's experience. It's absolutely brutal. It's stealing the context of what they're really going through. It's punishing the fact that they're unfinished, they're still growing. Their real needs are there, but their real needs are essentially a threat to you. It's brutal because we're leaving children feeling very much watched and weighed and found wanting. And that's where you could have and should have and still can hopefully show up as a place of guidance and refuge and safety and very steady care. And it, as parents, I think it can be brutal to us too, because our old fears rise up inside of us. It's like our alarm system starts running around and the alarms go off. Your own shame from your past can turn you into a harsher person. When you believe you're confronting some kind of evil, it can, again, when you believe monstrous thoughts long enough, it turns you into a monster. And you're not colliding with sin. You're not colliding with the devil. You're colliding with immaturity and overload and fear and attachment and hunger and a nervous system that's pushed probably way past its limit for these children. And your children deserve far better than that kind of brutal interpretation. They deserve adults who can tell the difference between, a hard day and a hard situation and a bad heart. Between they're missing the skills to cope versus they have these filthy, dirty motives. To tell the difference between a kid being overwhelmed or tired and being rebellious. They are young people under construction. They're not this little tiny adversary to you or to your goal for a good family or family of kids that aren't causing trouble. That's not what's happening here. I hope that makes sense as a starting point. This is where we're starting. I've got a lot more to say, but see here. I'm going to skip a few just for the sake of time, because this is going to be a longer presentation. Phil, in the fundamental circles Tim and I were in, there was a doctrine of original sin, meaning all are born in sin due to the fall of Adam and Eve. Original sin is a really harmful belief. Yeah, you're lost, and doesn't matter what you do. If you're a child of Adam and Eve, you're wicked and you're already condemned. That's repeated in the New Testament, of course. John chapter 3 talks about that. You're condemned already. I want to say, secondly, let me see if I can actually put this up for a second. Let's see here. Does that? Okay, yeah. I'm going to start putting some of these up if I can. I think it's important to say that dysregulation is this state of them feeling like they're absolutely overloaded. They're in a spot where there's pressures that maybe you don't know about. They're overtired. They're over cranky for some reason. Um, that this is a state that we need to be much more sensitive to. And a lot of things happen when this state occurs. A lot, you could say, goes offline for them. And it's one of the most important shifts, again, that we as parents are ever going to make. When we go into an understanding of dysregulation, we understand that this is a surge. This is a period for our kids of overload. It's happening in our child's moment at that moment, and if we can get this right, we're going to get a truer reading of the scenes in our homes than we did before. Um, this is where, when you're in that moment, it's so difficult to just stop for a second and stop yourself, especially if this stuff is, you've been overloaded too. Maybe you're overloaded with a lot of other stuff in life, so your kids are overloading you. So you're trying to be sensitive to them, but also be sensitive to yourself. You're overloaded, but your flexibility is going to drop in those moments when everything's heightened. Your ability to listen, your frustration is going to go up. Your tolerance is going to go down. All that. You're looking at how do you recover from this situation, and your kid is starting to cry and yell and freeze and shut down and lash out. They might get silly, but they certainly would likely get chaotic. They might collapse on the floor. They might just go blank, act like they didn't hear you or truly not hear you. They might somehow not be hearing what you're saying. They might stare in the distance. They might cling to you, like they're trying to hold themselves together. Who knows? But in these kinds of states, children have, for the moment, lost access to coping mechanisms and skills that they probably genuinely have on their better days and their better hours. And it's not about information, and it's not about them listening to you. It's the fact that they don't have access to those coping skills at that moment. The skill might be somewhere inside them, but the way that they get to it, that doorway, has been very narrowed. They used to have kind words, and that's one of the hardest parts. You look at your kids, and sometimes it's like they were a little angel an hour ago. They were so sweet to each other. They were playing together nicely, and now they're bashing each other's heads in with the toys. They're crying. Why? Why did it switch? They handled disappointment before so beautifully. Now the pressure, the tiredness, the strain, the stress of maybe, again, the transition, their hunger, their fears, it all floods their system. And it leaves those coping skills out of reach temporarily. Some kids get real quiet. Some kids get real loud all over the place. And it can kind of fool adults in both directions. A silent child can look very compliant, but you may think, oh, they're obedient, they're silent, they're quiet. I told them to quiet down, and they did. I did my job, and they're being really, really quiet. Wow, this is great. We don't know that. Their inner mind, their inner life may have gone absolutely rigid, straight as a board. They are freezing. They're staring. They're going flat in their face. They're giving one-word answers. They could be carrying as much distress as the child who's just screaming away on the floor and having a temper tantrum. One of your kids is going to turn all this stress outward. Another one's going to turn it inward. It's all variations on the same theme. They don't know how to deal with it. And that distinction matters, because adults sometimes only recognize the stress that a kid's under when it comes out in a dramatic way. But dysregulation comes out in all kinds of ways. Some children explode. Some children disappear. Some are going to argue with you. Some are going to walk away. Some are going to go limp, or they literally won't even stand up. I've had that from time to time. It's weird. Some kids go hard and cold. Some kids are going to cling to you in different ways. And either way, they're basically emptying out their emotions in the only way that they know how to. And that's why we got to keep going back to the point that Christianity mislabeled so much. It mislabeled everything, really. But they missed the truth. They missed the truth. They really missed the truth. And when you look at a dysregulated child and you admit to yourself they have lost access to parts of themselves that they could reach, an hour ago or a day ago, where they could calm themselves down. They know better, in some abstract sense. But in that loaded moment, they can't get that same skill there to calm it down. And it's the same child. It's the same child as before and after. On a good morning, everything can go well, and on a good morning, an hour later, there's screaming and snatching and slamming doors. And it turns into a time full of pressure. And one of the hardest parts, I think, for me is to say to myself, they're not reasoning. And I know we can say, well, they're just kids. They're not going to reason like adults anyway. But still, children can reason to some extent. We have to admit that their ability to reason, it kind of goes out the door. It goes somewhere else. It goes nowhere. When overload is the main dynamic, it's running the room. Your long speech, this is why you need to obey, and this is the issue, and your long-winded pressure, it's just going to bounce off them. Your moral lecture, you're just adding pressure to their system that's already flooded, and you want to guide them, but it's not going to work until they have slowed down to a steady spot. And so what's important in those moments, to me especially, is connection, saying, I want to know how to make you safe. You don't necessarily say that to them, but you're thinking to yourself, I can tell that you don't feel safe right now. Maybe it's time for fewer words. Maybe we can just have a little distraction so that it doesn't feel as intense. And then maybe we can have just less words here, and let's find some way to, number one, I'm going to keep myself regulated as the adult in the room, and I'm going to find some way to make you feel safe. Dysregulation it's a state. It's a moment of overload. This is a response that the kids give to strain. We're not going to say this is the final verdict of your character. This is not proof of your bad intent as a child, or that you're a wicked person, or that original sin is true. What they're feeling is cornered. A child that's in overload is cornered. They might even look like, oh, I'm trying to control you as the adult. They're probably, if you could, again, this is about interpreting what's going on. And I love, that's one of the reasons I love the dog whisperer kind of things, where you see, is it Caesar somebody? But it's been a minute. But the idea of seeing, when you look at a dog, you say, oh, that dog's being so defiant. That dog's being this or that. But then you get someone that knows how to interpret a dog's behavior. You're like, holy smokes, like there's something else going on here. How is it that one person with a dog can get the dog in 10 minutes to just calm down? The other person, that dog's ready to bite your hand off. It's amazing what you learn when you see the dog whisperer kind of stuff. And we need to take some of those principles over to our parenting and say, a lot of this is not about bad child, bad dog. It's about bad owner. It's about bad parent. It's about, are you interpreting this correctly and responding correctly? You could have a child that is looking very controlling, and in reality, what they're doing is they're grasping for some kind of predictability, or they look very manipulative to you. And what they're doing is they're reaching for a connection in the only form that they can, and it's messy, and it looks dramatic, but it's dramatic because their nerves are truly overwhelmed. And we have such harsh systems by which we misread this whole picture. We really do. I'll read a few comments here. Hey, Phil, I'm not going to go back to that at the moment. I want to stay on target. I feel like original sin is a really good topic. I'm going to keep moving because I do want to make sure that I stay on target. I want to make sure the focus is on dysregulation of kids, but I'll touch on that throughout this. I'm sure it'll come up several more times. But yeah, I agree with you. Original sin is a myth, but definitely agree with you. Yeah, it's a harmful belief, and it infects so much. It's funny. The preachment of infection is itself infectious. We have to learn to self-regulate first before we try to regulate our children. Yeah. Yeah. Dark God 6, great to see you. Thank you so much. My teacher preparation program also helped me really helped me see the baloney in Christianity's view of children. Yeah. Phil says that so-called holy book is a load of tosh, indecipherable, archaic, contradictory, and doesn't equate with reality. And all-knowing God didn't even know how to get a book written that people can agree on. Yeah, for sure. Unfortunately, my daughter's district is mostly backward Christian 6-day creationists. They think psychology and science is baloney, trying to get them to understand she needs support for dysregulation. Yeah, that's so sad and so common, I think, unfortunately. But that's where we do. That's where we end up. We end up exactly there. These kids are in many ways in overload, panic, and desperation. Their nervous system is trying, perhaps badly and loudly, but they're trying to regain their footing. And if we can see that what we used to see as a moral failure is them in pain, it's a stress response. It's some kind of overload. They're grieving. They're immature and they're grieving. Um, it's one of the most amazing things when you say to yourself, it's sad, but it's just amazing when you flip the switch on your mind and you say, "Holy smokes, my kid's in trouble. Not in trouble with the school or anything, not with me. My kid's in trouble with their own mind. My kid's in trouble with their own sense of safety. My kid does not feel safe in their own skin or in whatever, in the context that you're in. They see that they're challenging your authority is upsetting you, and so they see you escalating, and then they escalate more. And then through this, because you haven't learned yet to de-escalate yourself and regulate yourself, you're both pushing each other right to the edge of what either one of you can hold. You can't they can't hold it in, and you can't deal with it yet. And it's an immaturity issue on both sides. And that's where if we admit this and say, I see there's more going on here in my kids' hearts, it's amazing how it turns back at us and you say, wait a second, there's more going on in my heart too. But again, obviously the focus is primarily ultimately on your kids. But if you want to help regulate them, you also need to regulate yourself. But a wise parent is going to ask some different questions than they did as Christians. What state is my child in right now? What has their day at school or with their friends? What has their day demanded of them? Did something just tip the balance? Is this mostly a missing coping skill? Is this about a strain or a trigger? Again, are they trying to connect in some way and I'm missing it? Are they in some kind of collapse, with their emotions or nervous system? And instead of, when you ask those honestly, you stop rushing toward the accusation and you start saying, I want to be wiser in my interpretation and I want to care and make them safe. Their behavior truly may need some guidance. You may need discipline to be part of the equation. You may need to say, I'm not going to let you watch your show because you won't stop hitting your sibling. I'm not talking about the kind of gentle parenting that says, I'm willy-nilly going to let you do whatever you want. I just want to cuddle you and say, oh, I'm so sorry about everything. Life is so hard. I'm not talking about being a pushover as a parent, but their behavior does need guidance. And we'll get into that more in a little bit. But your child's heart needs care. And that's the tension that all these harsh systems like Christianity never taught us. Children may need a firm line, but they also may need a very deep understanding in the same moment. They need to stop slapping their sibling. They need to stop hitting, each other. But also you need to interpret their distress. We want them to be accountable for their actions, but we want self-regulation and co-regulation. We want them to be able to see, especially adults around them, their parents saying, I'm holding the boundaries up. You can't, hit your sibling, but I recognize you've lost your footing right now in some way. And we're not going to necessarily use those words, but we'll use words that are appropriate for them. But we know what's going on. They've lost their emotional footing, their grounding. And to say, I'm going to be with you calmly while you find your footing again. I'm not going to spank the shit out of you I'm not going to spank you like crazy until you basically bend to my will. And I'm certainly not going to escalate it where if my spanking of you doesn't work, I'm going to start, pulling your hair or hitting you with a shoe over the head or something. Like, no, we're not escalating this stuff. We're not. Basically, your job at this point is to say, I want to reinterpret the emotional scene going on. You, my dear child, are not an enemy to conquer. Your heart and your disobedience is not an enemy to conquer. I see you, my darlings, as young people whose inner system is buckling under strain. You are hurting, and I'm going to hurt with you, and I'm going to cry the tears with you, and I'm going to sit with you calmly. When we do that, we are giving that shift is giving us the chance to spare our children so much needless shame and so many years of confusion. And it can spare you years of putting yourself in a spot where I'm the punisher. I'm going to get in a very hard, firm state. I'm going to punish you, and the beatings will continue until morale improves, that kind of stuff. We're not dealing with their corrupt nature or identity. We're dealing with innocent children, not sinners, innocent children who are struggling in what's arguably a very difficult world, and getting more difficult by the day. A difficult world, difficult family, perhaps, difficult state, whatever. They need your love. They need your calmness. Let me read a few comments here, and then I'm going to move on to the next main point. Let's see here. Amy says, what is up with the families that yell no to the kids and the pats all day long, and it has almost zero effect on behavior? Even their dog is hyperactive and knocks you over, even if playfully, and the owner is all embarrassed. Yeah, Amy, that's a good point. Yeah, the yelling does not make a difference. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges for a lot of us, is just to calm ourselves down, calm our hearts down, calm our emotions down, calm our voices down. Absolutely. It's a great call out for us to say we have to calm ourselves down. We're not going to get them calm if we're not calm. Zones of regulation. It's a color-coded system to help children self-identify where they're at. I have not, but I will look that up. Thank you for pointing that out. It's great. I'll definitely look that up. When they can self-identify, they can pick appropriate strategies to help regulate. Nice. I'll be looking that up. Zones of regulation. Wanted to say here for the next one, children are learners, and their development matters far more than we realize. Children are learners, and their development matters far more than we realize. And what I mean by that is they are basically, as children, carrying tools. And it is a very unfinished set of tools. Years ago, I was I worked for a contractor. I was a cabinet maker. And I did that for about 4 years. I was a custom cabinet maker. I made custom furniture, custom trim. We worked for a lot of people that had very old homes. I worked in one house I'll never forget. It was built in 1796, and it's a guy that is a plastic surgeon in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, and a very old home. And he was trying to keep it, by and large, to the period in which it was built. And so, if there was some kind of molding that had been there since 1796, and it was now rotted for some reason, he needed a replacement that looked identical to the original. And so we'd figure out how to make custom moldings. And it was some cool stuff. But when one of the most frustrating things about jobs like that is if there's a tool out there that would make your job work, or work better, or be safer, or just an absolutely far superior outcome, and you just don't have it. You don't have the tool, or you don't have access to it. And that, of course, is very, very common. If you ever watched that show on PBS, The New Yankee Workshop with Norm Abrams, where he's got everything. I mean, any tool you can think of, he's got it. If he doesn't have it right there on the camera, he's got it in the back room, and he can wheel it in. And you're like, yeah, it's really nice to see how to do all this stuff, but 99% of people are not going to have that tool. So you're showing us how to do it with the tool that almost none of us will get. But you wish for the right tools, and yet we have to admit, kids are dealing with a very, very unfinished set of inner tools. They have enormous potential, and we want to help them get to that. But those inner tools are going to sort of come to fruition and come online for them very gradually, very unevenly, very messily, and under a lot of influence from the daily relationships and conversations that they have, the pressures. If we're going to help them to grow in this area and to thrive, it's going to have to be through the repetition of safety, through kind guidance, through practice and modeling, through limits, steady limits that we give them, and just the sense that there is a security that's just overarching across everything. There's security that will help them back away from the edge. We're not going to get right up to the edge of our emotions, the edge of intensity, through our discipline and through our words or whatever. We're going to help them back away from the edge of the intensity. They're dealing with impulse control, They're obviously, as little kids. I remember as when the babies first learn to sort of throw their heads back, you almost have to watch it because they'll throw their heads back and just whack you in the face if you're not careful at the very beginning. It's pretty intense, but their impulse control is growing in stages. Their flexible willingness to think through different issues from different vantage points, it's going to grow in stages. Their ability to have the wording for it, the emotional wording, it grows in stages. Their ability to tolerate their frustration or to wait and say, hey, I am making you a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but it's going to be 15 minutes. Just go play something. I'm not going to give it to you right yet. All that stuff, it's all in stages. And when they're in recovery mode, or something bad happens and now it's kind of over, it's okay now, but their ability to get back to the let's have a good day mode, this is good. Their executive function, all of it, their ability to stop and rest or to pause and wait a minute, to weigh the options, to think there's a rule for this situation. And I do have to think, what's the rule my parents gave me or the teacher gave me? Their ability to shift gears. Okay, so we're wrapping up this one thing, we're going to do another. All this, their ability to go through all these and to speak with a calmer voice and have a calmer place in their mind, it's growing over the years, but it's not finished. And so you might give them a rule about how we're going to do life, and in 1 hour, they're fine with it. They can grasp it and obey it. But then the next hour, for some reason, it's harder, and they can't, and they crumble. They know better. Say, oh, you know better. But they can't reach that coping mechanism, that skill set right now. They're not there. A child that's calm and settled and a child that's overloaded are going to have, in a sense, different levels of access to their wording, to their flexibility, to their safety, to their memories of, we did this before and it worked out okay. They're not going to think the same way, and they're not going to have the ability to do self-restraint the same way. And I think you could really argue that so much of our, by the way, I see some comments, I will get to them very shortly. So much of our harsh parenting, which is what we're in some ways trying to work against here. I'm not trying to just focus on the negative, but we are going to bring that in a number of times. So much of our harsh parenting rests on what you might call a category error. We're confusing the developmental limits with their failure in terms of the morality, especially as Christians. We're confusing their gap in maturity with what we would have called a character flaw before. There's no darker problem here. They're in a state of an unfinished capacity. Your child stumbles and yells or screams or is upset or disobedient in this heated moment. And at that point, we are going to be much better off in the long run if we, instead of saying you're guilty, there's proof that you're whatever, you're not obeying me or you're disobeying, and especially as Christians, you're sinful. These are children who are growing, who are learning to have the inner tools that they wish they had. They don't have them yet. And a lot of us, I think if we're really honest with ourselves, one of the biggest issues here is that we are expecting adult level, adult grade emotional performance from children whose inner systems are still very, very much under construction. And when we put children under that pressure, that you should be acting like an adult, you should be able to cope like an adult. And any, if you fail to live up to this standard of just everything is calm, everything is obedient, everything is clean, nothing is messy, everything is a good attitude. When you see that desire in your heart, and then you see the children don't do that, you see them stumble. What happens is, how should I put it? You're moralizing their lag and their lack of development. You're saying your unfinished growth proves you're a bad kid or you're corrupt. I mean, we would use different language now, but I think even as unbelievers, we would still sometimes fall in these same traps. Children who melt down and aren't able to cope, or they're disobedient in some way, they're missing the skills. Maybe your child lies to you. Maybe they literally just lie to your face. They're afraid of what happens if they tell the truth and get in trouble. You might have a child that's going to interrupt you all the time, or they're going to grab stuff, or they're going to blurt stuff out. They fall apart they're frustrated, and it's not because it's a sinister motive. And we gotta make sure as adults we're not missing the difference here. We need to add the maturity that we can have, and this is why we're talking about this. Add the maturity to say, there is a distinction that I will add that I've never had in my equation as an adult, as a parent before. You are acting out in a way that's simply revealing you don't have the tools that you need to cope with this. I'm not going to keep turning my conversation with you, children, to condemnation. And that's a huge tragedy in what we do with our kids. So many people, so many kids get treated like they're failing at adult level coping mechanisms while they're still in childhood. We get scolded that we don't have the capacity and capability, yet that stuff isn't even formed yet. It's not going to be formed perhaps for years to come, at least not consistently. And we got measured against this standard that belonged to a later stage of life. And we got shamed, deeply shamed, for coming up short. Children are not miniature adults. We got to get that through our heads. And all the stuff I'm saying to you, I'm learning. I'm not in any way trying to preach. I'm trying to say these are things that are hard on my heart to say, man, oh man, we can all do better. But children are not miniature adults. They are still building the very skills that we are demanding them in these hot, intense moments. And sometimes a child can understand the rule when everything's okay, but they can lose access to that when there's an overload or there's some kind of whatever, fatigue or stress. When you look at these kids with this newer perspective, and it starts to sink into you that this is what's going on, you begin to say, I'm going to give them grace like I've never given them before. I want to say to myself always, I bet that the reason you're acting out is because there's something in your heart that is hurting you. I think it's a truism for the most part, not always, but it's a truism that hurt people. Well, we say that mostly about adults, but it's true of kids too. Hurt children. When they're hurting, they're sad, they're deprived in some way, they're under stress, and their development is going to move in very jagged lines. Just because they were fine yesterday with something doesn't mean they're going to be fine with it today. And they can be very mature, and then the next conversation, the next hour, the next day, it falls apart when the plans change. And if your tolerance for the frustration of that doesn't start to increase, you're going to basically take it out on them. Their development is not going to be a straight line. And I think, wise parents are going to say, what level of maturity can I really expect here at this age? What's realistic here? What are the inner tools that they have? And what are the tools that they're most likely working on, but not going to really have for a while? And you ask yourself, is the demand that I'm placing on the children at this point, does it match their present capacity in light of the context and the strain? That's critical. And a large share, I think, of what we would call disobedience is really just a clash between our expectations, our bad expectations, our inappropriate expectations as adults, and the reality of their developmental stage. Why are we moralizing their immaturity instead of simply understanding its immaturity? I think that's a leftover from Christianity. We moralize everything. We're treating their missing skill sets to cope like it's some kind of filthy motive. And again, we have a chance. We have a real chance here of creating a roadmap that is a map of safety, of understanding their stress and their capacity and how they grow. We are expecting basically a very polished version of these kids, and in reality, their executive functioning is still so much taking shape. And that's best case scenario. If you add in neurodivergence, you add in divorce, you add in separate homes, blah blah blah. You add in struggles at school, you add in bullying, you add in lack of sleep, you add in any medical issues. It goes up from there. And once you start to see this stuff, the religious ideologies and reflexes that we've been going by for so long, they start to crumble and crack, and you say, I'm better than this. I can finally move from punishing their unfinished growth, and instead I can just help them and teach them the next step with safety. And the whole the whole challenge changes. Instead of how do I force better behavior right now, it's what does this child need to help them build and to feel safe in the process? And how do I bring all these things to the table in the context where in the home in general and specifically in these rough situations, I am just overwhelmingly tender and understanding. There's a real opportunity here. Our teaching can be slower, calmer, steadier, and far less demanding. And if we're willing to just say, I no longer am aimed at the target of raw control. I just want to control my children. If you can get off of that bandwagon, if you can get off of that high horse, and my goal is not to control my children. My goal is to understand them. And, one of the things that I think is a good thing to carry over, there's a few things I carry over from Christianity that I still keep in some sense, even if I change the wording. But one of them is that when I was a Christian, it was always the content or the preachment that children don't really belong to you. They're your children, but they're your children in the sense that God is lending them to you temporarily, but they're really, it's a privilege and it's a responsibility. But God has lent them to you for a short time, but they don't really belong to you. This is your job. This is your task. And in a very real sense, I think we need to see ourselves the same way, that these children are not ours. They're not property. They're not your project. These are real humans. These are developing humans. These are adults in the making. It's, later in life, but you're not here to get them to a perfect state. You're here to understand. You're here in many ways to just listen better. And when you do that, you'll say to yourself, wow, like I can see, number one, that they're struggling and I will meet them where they're at. Number two, I can see how my childhood, perhaps with, screaming or spanking or whatever, I can see how that programmed me, even as a deconverted former Christian. It programmed me to respond a certain way. And I need to respond with more secular grace than ever before. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Let me go to a few comments here. I've stepped away for too long. One second. Okay, it looks like I didn't miss too many. That's good. Yeah, when they can self-identify their regulation, they can pick appropriate strategies. Good stuff. OTs often use the zones of regulation. Visuals are really great for young children. Yeah, for sure. Self-care is important as a parent as well. You can't pour from an empty cup. You can't help co-regulate if you've never regulated. We also have to recognize that school often does not allow appropriate sensory input, too much sound, not enough deep pressure, heavy work, movement, which all provide feedback to the brain. So by the time they get home, children are often in a dysregulated state because they haven't had all the input they need and too much visual sound input. Yeah, agreed. It's important not to tie good or bad to each color of the zones of regulation. Feelings aren't right or wrong. They just are their signal. Here's a 90s classic, Use Your Inside Voice. Yeah, exactly. Here's an 80s classic, You're the Voice by John Farnham. What a banger. Yeah, how about let those poor babies go outside? We evolved outside 90% of the time. Our body needs that sensory input, or it senses something that's wrong. It puts stress on our central nervous system. Yeah, for sure. Interesting topic. I feel like I can relate this. Thank you, Granzino. I'm so glad. I hope some of this is helpful to us. The next part I'm going to put up here on the little banner. Behavior carries meaning, and a richer map changes everything. Behavior carries meaning, and a richer map changes everything. Every parent knows that there are rough days. That's just part and parcel of this. There's behavior that's going to be disruptive. It's going to make you mad. It's going to be costly. Sometimes it's going to be messy. You might literally have a mess to clean up or something that's ruined. It can be painful. A child may hit the other kids or even hit you. Children scream, children lie, children shut down. They resist times when you're saying, we're done this, we're going to that. The harm is real. The limits do matter. Other people matter. You have to protect the other siblings. Your property matters. You don't want them destroying stuff. The safety of their siblings has to be a priority. But through all this, I think when we realize that behavior is the surface level, and there's meaning underneath of it, that like the visible action is the headline, but there's a deeper story that's several layers below. There again in the levels of their fear, their fight or flight, their overload, their weak skills, perhaps their pain. Maybe some kids also have a need that they do not have a way to express yet. I mean, it's amazing to me when I look at my kids sometimes where they'll say, "Daddy, I've got a paper cut," and I'll say, "When?" And like we'll be going to bed, and I'll be giving them hugs and kisses. We'll have sung a few songs. We do family time every night where we get to talk about their day, and I'm just like, we've done everything. We've brushed our teeth. We've hugged and done hugs and kisses. Everything is done. Lights are out. Fan is on for the white noise. We're just done. And all of a sudden, Daddy, I have a paper cut. Can I have a Band-Aid? I'm like thinking to myself, well, sure, of course. But I'm thinking we could have dealt with this, when it happened. When did it happen? Oh, it's been hurting me all day. And you sometimes think to yourself, why did you let a paper cut just sit there and hurt you all day? But somehow in their minds, they would rather deal with the pain than walk away from perhaps a movie that they're watching or something that's fun or a game. And so you think to yourself, that doesn't make sense, but like that's where they're at. They didn't have the capacity for some reason to express the pain that they were in. And that's very literal and physical, but in a metaphorical sense, I think they're dealing with pain it's like a paper cut inside their emotions that they're like, I don't quite know how to say it, or I just don't want to say it because I'm distracted. But the minute that they have the chance to bring it out, it carries meaning, intense meaning that we need to focus on. And, when we realize that behavior has a deeper meaning, if we're going to look past it, if we're going to be the kid whisperer, to carry that through, if we're going to be the kid whisperer, it can rescue you as a parent from reading them incorrectly, 1,000 times. You move away from the panic of they're being bad. You move towards a wiser interpretation, a healthier, non-toxic interpretation of what's going on. And again, you don't want your child to be treated in your own mind as simply like this is a courtroom. You're guilty or you're not. You want to see them basically as someone who's got inner resources that sometimes get strained, sometimes get depleted. Their inner resources are buckling when they're struggling like this. You think about a child crying over the wrong color cup. You have 6 different color cups, and the one that they wanted the purple one, and the purple one is in the dishwasher. And they start screaming, "I insist on the purple cup." And you're like, "The green one is fine, sweetie. It's the same size. It's the same shape. It's everything. It's just a different color. I want the purple cup." And you say, "Please stop. Please stop. Just the green cup is fine. Let it go." We don't know what kind of strain they've been under all day. And their strain is not adult strain, but to them, child strain is still stress. There's so many ways in which this comes out. We see children getting upset over homework or lying to us. We realize, if we're judicious about this, that their brain has been spent. There's been 100 other, maybe 1,000 earlier demands throughout their day. And they've been told over and over, show up, do it this way, look that way, turn left, move this, sit down, stand up, get in line. They have had so many demands on them. And at this point, they seem to be stirring up trouble. But what they're dealing with is aching for a connection, and they're aching for reassurance. And they may not know how to say it, but that's what they're doing. They're going wild after they're perhaps in sometimes rigid settings, especially school, and they're starting to get to a point where they have to discharge some of this tension. And you have children who seem fine in public, and this is frustrating. I see this. They're fine in public, but then they fall apart the minute that they get home. They have been holding everything together by force. They have been, doing the right thing and making sure their teachers feel happy with them, their daycare. And all of a sudden they're in their home environment and they explode, or they freeze, or they, do something that you think of as bad behavior. They may have been swallowing down their frustration or their shame or humiliation or, stress, fatigue for hours. They've been under pressure all day and you haven't seen it. And then there's some little moment like, I want the purple cup. And that's the final crack in the wall for them. And this is where we need a better, richer map. The poor map just flattens everything. This is just motives. You're being a brat, you're being mean, you're being whatever, you're being violent to your siblings. We need a map in our minds that says, what category of struggle is my child dealing with through this behavior? And again, when you're religious, the category of struggle is simply you're a filthy sinner. It doesn't really matter why you're doing this. You need to bow your knee both to me and to God, and to doing obedience and the righteous thing. But instead of saying, what's wrong with this child? You have to say to yourself, as just step back from the edge. Imagine that were taking a video snapshot in a sense of even like a child you've never seen before. You're just like you're a pure observer. You're just like you're studying children. Pull yourself in that mode. I'm a student of my child. You see them screaming for the purple cup. You have to ask yourself, what kind of difficulty am I looking at right now? Not how does this upset me as a parent who's also tired from being at work all day? Whatever. What are they struggling with? What is the difficulty that I'm looking at when I look at these children? Sometimes you're seeing, again, dysregulation. Sometimes you're seeing some kind of testing of the boundaries. Sometimes it's a stress response. Sometimes it's, again, attachment to stress. Sometimes it's a clash of temperaments. Sometimes it might be a learned pattern in your family. Maybe you think this is bad behavior, but if you're really honest and could have an outside third party, they would say, you have all, including adults, been doing this. This is a learned pattern. They see you do it as adults, and they're doing the same thing. You didn't see it yet. They are truly becoming little yous, and you have a problem regulating yourself. And now, as adults, and now they are doing the same thing in their childlike ways. It's amazing what happens when you start to become a gentle, caring, gracious, merciful, empathetic student of your children. And sometimes these issues are all woven together, in the same moment with kids. Let me look at any comments here. One second here. So your shell says, Christianity is so performative too, though no one will admit it, since the pressure is on raising godly children. No one wants to be the parent of the kid throwing a fit. Yeah, exactly. You're seen as it's attacking your parenting skills and your Christianity. Shell, you have some interesting insights. This is a tricky, extremely complex topic. Yeah. Shell's got some great stuff here. By the way, Shell, I'm going to just do what I'm doing here today, but I'll definitely open this up at some point to the same kind of topic, but for all of us. I'll probably do that within the next week. I think it'd be a worthwhile thing. Maybe even direct people and say, hey, we're going to do an open mic night on this topic, but I did more of a monologue style thing, 5 days ago, whatever. Watch it if you can, but I would love to have you on to share some stuff in real time. A man boards a plane and sees an old friend already boarded. He calls out, "Hi, Jack," and moments later someone comes in. Yeah. So often children don't get to be in control. Also, why time outside is important. They need time to explore their independence. We need a sense of mastery and independence as we grow. Yeah. For sure. So going back to some points here for this topic about the map. When we look at this, there are different categories of what they're struggling with. I think it's important to say that there's different responses that we are privileged and responsible to have. For example, if you are seeing that they simply don't have the skill set to deal with certain things, maybe that's a time when you can really become a better teacher, how to, teach them how to calm themselves down, or to think through something, take a step back. I know for me, it was really interesting just watching some kids shows where some of the stuff would come up, like you'd see Daniel Tiger. You'd see other shows where they would talk about different things and be like, they're literally teaching children stuff, but they're teaching adults things. They know the adults are watching too. Even Bluey, if you watch Bluey, there's some stuff they're teaching children about life. Bluey is teaching adults how to be better adults. It's amazing. Bluey is a kids show. It's also an adult show. I highly recommend it. But on that note, I also recommend Inside Out 1 and 2 from Disney. Just understanding there's different things going on in kids' heads. that Inside Out is worth its weight in gold. Great movies. But maybe again, this is a point where you can teach some stuff. Maybe if they're dysregulated, what you really need is just to be very steady and calm. Maybe what they need to know most of all is just that you are a steady, calm place for their lives. Maybe if they're testing your boundaries, you need to be calm but also very clear, and you have good follow through. Again, not in a berating sense, but just helping them understand these are the guidelines, and you're not going to be able to hurt your siblings, whatever. There are boundaries, and you will lose privileges. You won't watch your show, whatever. Maybe sometimes there's like an attachment to stress, and what you need most is to reassure them. Like when they're under the distress of like, I feel disconnected from you, what you need most is to connect with them. I mean, I love the fact that I can come up to my children and just sit right next to them and just like, hey, I love you. I love you. It's going to be okay. And I think of my one child who's Owen, who's 11. You sit next to him really quietly. Just give him a little gentle back rub. Hey, man, I love you. I'm so proud of you. It literally calms everything down, and it makes such a world of difference. But overall, we're basically, in a sense, saying our children are at times running on fumes, and we don't realize it. They're running on fumes, and you would, if your car was running on fumes and sputtering, you'd say, I know what to do here. I know what to do. Either fill it up with gas or take it to the mechanic. I know that there's something broken here. Let's fix it. But you're going to be a better parent, and me as well, when we stop insisting on there's one simple answer for every problem, every hard problem. It's not one problem. It's not one situation. It's not one issue, and it's not one answer. Different categories matter. We do have to have different kinds of responses in these cases. You're going to see children perhaps that are tending to do more like the responses are interrupting you, or grabbing things, or they melt down a lot, or maybe they lie a lot. And the deeper issue, I'm not saying this is always the issue, but the deeper issue could be that they just have no emotional wording for this. They need better vocabulary. Maybe you need to talk through with them how to deal with the frustrations that they have and how to tolerate that. Or maybe you have to be more patient. Some of them have very shaky impulse control, and you can find ways to work through these things with them. And some of it's just practicing with them. Practicing. They need teaching. They need rehearsal. They need you to model it, and they need a lot of gentle support. But we this is our calling. We can talk all day long about what we need our kids to do and how we can help them, but we're going to come back to this point over and over. We need, as adults, to slow down and see the missing tools, first in our parenting and then in their lives as children. Far too many children are getting punished for lacking a capacity that we have not helped them build. We're punishing them for not having something that we are responsible to give them. And that stinks. And they get shamed for it when it's really us who should be ashamed. They get treated like they're resisting us when they're actually they're flailing. They're treated like they're choosing chaos. The reality may actually be far more human, far less dramatic. They've never learned the mature way to work through that particular kind of situation yet, that moment. And they need your help. They're testing the boundaries, and they could look, straight at you in the face and push again where, you've already had the rule. They just push and push and push. They're checking if that line is real. Do you really have boundaries? Are you a steady adult? Is the rule going to hold? And that there's a call at that point for you to have very calm clarity, follow through, to not see this as moral panic. But when you're a steady adult, you can hold that line and not see this as like a power battle. Some children push because they're asking, and it's the only perhaps rough way that they know how to ask. They're asking you, in a sense, is this place stable? Is this adult steady? Where will the line be? Is it going to stay where it was 5 minutes ago? And if we have calm boundaries, then we can really answer that question effectively, far more powerfully and healthily than we could by just raising our voices and laying down the law and punishing them all over the place. Children in stress responses are going to get clingy. They're going to get explosive. They're going to get irritable. They're going to get avoidant. They're going to get extra reactive. I mean, think about the kids going through hyper hard issues. Like, again, maybe school just is not going well for them. Maybe they've never liked their teacher. Maybe they feel like they've got no friends, no real friends at school. Maybe they're going through divorce or something like that in the family. And so many issues like this. Again, any kind of bullying at all. Maybe you don't even, maybe they feel like they can't even tell you because you're gonna say, "Oh, just deal with it," or just talk to your teacher, and it's no big deal. Like they don't know that you're gonna actually take it seriously. But they are, as a result of all this stuff, chronically exhausted and unstable and under tension. And they're really saying, you see bad behavior and say, I hate the way you treat each other. I hate the way you aren't nice to your siblings, whatever. And you can legitimately admit that. Like, you can say, I really don't like the way you're hitting your siblings, whatever. Be honest with yourself about what you're seeing. It's really frustrating. But see past the facade and see your kids are basically saying something else. They're saying, I am carrying too much. I am carrying, this weight is too much to bear. And it looks out of proportion to us as adults, because the response looks huge, when the issue, like, it's a small issue and your response is so huge. Sometimes, for example, my kids will argue over a seat. I want that seat. Well, that seat is literally identical to the other one. Yeah, but that's the one I was in. And if they don't get it, the response is out of proportion, it seems to us. But it looks like a huge out of proportion response, because to them, the overarching load that's on their hearts that you can't see has been huge for a long time. And then a tiny spark comes in the room. It's already full of fumes. It's already full of gas. And the behavior in front of you is overflowing, not from the fact that they just want that particular chair. It's from a whole bunch of other pressures that nobody's looking at, nobody's aware of. And, kids are going through all this. They're going through it in very messy ways. Some kids really, really don't have a way to express the fact that they are fighting, in a sense, for their lives on an emotional level. They don't know it. They're in one moment, they're just, I want that show. One moment, I want that chair. One moment, I don't want peas, but I do want carrots. It's like these individual things. And it's like these little teeny moments of, this is what we're dealing with as a family right now. But in reality, they're dealing with growth, human development. A lot of us, I think, see our children when they're in these moments of temperament clashes where they're intense, they're perhaps more sensitive, maybe they cry a lot. We see them as just being really, really difficult. They're more rigid, they're more persistent, but the reality is it's not misconduct. I mean, technically in some ways it is, but we need to see this as some people, some of the kids that we're dealing with are sensitive, and maybe you may be tempted to call them overly dramatic or whatever, and the intense child that seems difficult. But what's really happening here is that they're struggling on levels that you can't see. They're more sensitive, and the sensitivity is an extra intense way of them saying, I don't feel safe. I've absorbed the emotional state of my class at school and at the home, and things just feel volatile. Things feel volatile all the time. I feel like I'm constantly in a state of upsetting my teacher, upsetting my parents, upsetting the kids around me. And in that context, they're going to get intense. They're going to get difficult. They're going to get disrespectful. They're going to get highly reactive. They're going to be seen as a threat to the order of your home, because we imagine ourselves as having easy children, or we want that, right? And we have to get past the expectation of, if I just had all easy children, life would be so wonderful. You have to get past that false expectation and say, I don't care what children I put in my head is what I want or what I need. I want to look at the children I actually have, the actual children that I actually have, and say, I have a privilege and a responsibility to stop answering their strain with sharpness, to stop exploding. Your children are, in many ways, if they're still young, you have a chance to say, my family is those children are a mirror to the family as a whole. Your children are going to reflect the truths of the adults and of the household of what's going on. And they're not the scapegoat. They're not the place where you can say, oh, that's the bad kid. They're reflecting what's going on in your home as a parent. And in many ways, this is really our chance to step up to the plate. I would invite you to see your parenting through a fuller map. Move from being their disciplinarian and their prosecutor, move towards being their interpreter, professional interpreter. You still do protect, you still do correct, but you start listening beneath the noise. You start asking better questions. Again, what state is my child in? What happened earlier today that maybe I didn't see? What kind of load has been building on their hearts? Is this mainly about their stress? Is this mainly about their temperament? Is this mainly about a boundary issue? We are going to be opening doors to much wiser, healthier care of our children, and we're going to spare our children the added injury of being misread while they're already struggling if we can do this. If we can remind ourselves behavior might need correction, but the child still needs empathy and care. Our children need empathy and care throughout all this stuff, even if we have to do some kind of corrective behavior conversation still. Let's care about them. That's really something we already do for adults, isn't it? We just need to learn how to do it with the kids. If you're married and your spouse is feeling irritable or whatever, they look like they're having a rough day, you'd be an idiot to just say, "Hey, cut it out. Buck up. Stop being whatever. Stop," to your spouse. You don't talk to your spouse that way. You say, "Hey, sweetie, you okay? Do you need some time to yourself? Do you need to go take a bath? Is there anything I can do? Do you want to talk? Is there anything I've done to add to the weight of your day? Please let me know what I can do. What can I do to help? Do you just want to talk? I'll be glad to listen." You would talk to your spouse that way. You wouldn't just be like, "Just stop it. Stop being whatever." You don't talk to them that way. But we do to kids. And it's an invitation for us to be better. It's really an invitation for us to be better. Let me read through a few comments here. Philip says, "Our children need to enjoy humor and not take this life too seriously." Absolutely. Well said. Sensibly, yes, but not seriously. Another way of becoming regulated. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Humor will definitely diffuse a lot of problems. Our one-size-fits-all traditional classroom system backfires with a minority of students that can end up dysfunctional for life. Yeah, for sure. I'm not quite sure. I'm not going to put up a title for this next section, but I'm just going to sort of talk through it. I think sometimes in Christianity, I know we're mostly probably out of Christianity, those of us watching, but the parking lot scene at church, it was an opportunity for us to interpret things differently, and it said more than a lot of parents realized. I want you to picture a child that was in church, and they held it together through the whole service. Holding it together for a child is a lot. I remember holding it together very quietly. Don't do this, don't do that. We were, as kids, self-monitoring, trying to be quiet. Don't bang anything. Don't move too much. Don't fidget too much. We were trying to not draw attention to ourselves. But this effort to basically stay small and to look good, and especially in church where your goodness is being watched very closely by your parents and by God. You might have stiff clothes. You might have been told several times, "Stop it," or "Sit up," or "Don't do this, don't do that." Little whispered threats of, you better not do that. All these adult expectations were stacked sky high, and the guilt-heavy messages just drifting all over us. The whole setting in church organized around restraint, around performance, around scrutiny. And then the church service ends, you say your goodbyes, you walk, you get out the door, you go to the car, and the door shuts. And probably for a lot of us, when we were little, if we remember back that far, we would remember that at that point, the tears start flowing. The collapse came right after church. The instant the seatbelt clicked. Maybe it was over crackers. Maybe if it was over something the siblings had or did. Maybe if it was just over where are we going next? Some little microscopic incident. But we realize now as adults, now that we've grown up in that and we're looking back at these memories, we're saying whatever that little spark was, that was not the story. It certainly wasn't the whole story. It was, again, a spark that indicated the child, we were carrying too much. And then we had this harsh lens put on us that said, here comes the rebellion. Here comes the rebellion. Here comes the sin nature. I think we should argue that Christian culture is a harsh culture in many ways because it congratulates itself for keeping kids, shiny and polished inside the building for an hour or two. And then when the child collapses in the car, it's proof that the child is acting out, and maybe was acting out all along. And we basically unravel their character the whole time. We are basically, and we do this still as adults outside of church, but I think I'm remembering back to my childhood. How many corrections do you have from your childhood stacked up in your mind? How many times were you told, stop it, you're bad, you're broken, you're sinful? And how many times did you have, even if you obeyed and weren't on the bad side of this, how many signals went through past your radar as a kid about your tone, about your posture, about your side glances, about your words, everything, all these little warnings that you got? One wrong move could bring intense shame. How much felt like you were just enduring instead of thriving and feeling nourished as a child? We still do that. We still do the same thing that we went through as kids going to church. We are concerned about public behavior that is very tidy and polished, and where adults can congratulate themselves. And then when the kids collapse, we condemn them. And even though we know now that that is one of the signs that your child was an overload this whole time, public composure in general can be a terrible liar. A child that is quiet and supposedly well behaved can be flooded with emotions. A child can be still and be terrified. A child who looks like they're behaving in a high pressure setting could be spending every ounce of energy on containing themselves. And then that safer space later, when they don't have to act out, when they don't have to behave so well, when they get to the safer space, like back to your car, all of a sudden the car gets the tears, the car gets the reel them. They snap when they get home. So we as adults tend to praise their performance, and then we punish the cost of that performance. In the parking lot experience for us, it really tells the truth of what was going on behind closed doors in our hearts. The parking lot example, I think, to me is where we say to ourselves, that's what's going on in children and adults, where our nervous system at times is going to say, I suddenly realize I don't have to impress anybody. And the car ride home is like this hidden tax on the moral pressure that you've been going through. And the child who looks, again, composed 1 minute is overloaded the next. They weren't overloaded the next minute. It was just they were letting out what they've been holding in this whole time. They've been swallowing it, tightening up. They've been people pleasing. They've been people pleasers this whole time. And this can break your heart as a parent if you're not careful. But this is where we have to say, we as parents, over and over, we're going to say this: you need to rise to the occasion. Maybe your child is not the problem. Maybe the pressure is the problem. Maybe your kid is screaming in the back seat. Maybe they've been carrying the emotional weight of all kinds of other things. Maybe the meltdown is not about disrespect, and maybe it's about fatigue. Maybe it's about a desperate need to just be themselves. And maybe the scene in your child's day that looks the ugliest is actually the most honest part of their day. And if we as parents are willing to see them in their ugliest moments as simply being honest, then we have new questions to ask. We really do. If your child keeps unraveling at certain points in certain places, times of the day, whatever, what exactly are we doing that's shaping them? And what are we doing that's not respecting and understanding the fact that they're under all these pressures? And instead of blaming them, maybe we can move towards grieving the fact that they're hurting, and also grieving the fact that we haven't been sensitive. We've been so quick to accuse them, and instead of saying, how do I crush this? You got to say, what am I doing? What context am I creating as a parent that is putting pressure on them to smile and be a, shiny, happy person? You're doing that. I'm doing that. I encourage you to stop trying to make your kids feel polished. Let them be as honest as they can. And when it all comes out, those ugly moments are often the times when you really can connect with them on the truest level. I'm going to read a comment or two here and then go to the next point. Amy Collins says, I know this one well. I had chronic depression by age 6, completely misunderstood by the school social workers. Yeah. Hard stuff. I'm so sorry, Amy. Hard stuff. Not sure quite how to put this besides this way, but I think this is a good way to introduce the next section. Safety reaches further than food, shelter, and rules. So we're talking about safety. Again, safety reaches further than food, shelter, and rules. Your child can have everything that they really need. They can be fed, they can be clothed, they can be physically okay, protected. They can still live inside of a bubble of chronic vigilance and hypervigilance. If your child feels constantly sized up, constantly corrected, constantly judged, constantly unsure when the next wave of shame and anger and correction and accusation is going to come, then at that point, you're never going to win at this. You have to, as a parent, say, this is not about the children. This is about me. The children don't need to learn something. I need to learn something first. Survival and safety are not the same thing. Your child can have everything that they visibly need, but still move with their nervous system not having what they need. They can be like looking in the room, scanning. If you're observant, you'll even see this. They're scanning the room to see, I wonder what the parents are thinking. I wonder what the adult's mental state is. I wonder, what the tone is here. They're looking for the pauses. They're looking for the silences. They're looking for the danger. They can feel physically cared for and still feel emotionally cornered. Safety is not about survival. It's far, far more important. It's the hidden places where your child is deciding whether the people closest to them, probably you as parents, whether the people closest to them are a refuge or a threat. So that kid is saying, can I make a mistake? And can I still be okay in the eyes of the adults around me? Am I still going to be whole and acceptable in the adults that have power? Is home a place where I can bring the strain and the pressure into the light? Or is it a place where I have to take the strain and the pressure and hide it? And that, in many ways, includes tone. Your voice and your tone can steady your children or send fear through them. There's a predictability that children need. Predictability that can tell your child's nervous system, the ground beneath me of this home is not going to include wild swings in mood, sudden, lashing out, sudden severity. If there's ever changing standards and ever changing tones, children don't feel safe. Your face needs to have warmth. The threats have to diminish. There has to be warmth here. Children will read your face. They will see if your face looks like you're narrowing your mouth and hardening your eyes, narrowing your eyes. They'll see if you have a long exhale of like, oh, I'm disgusted. Like, they see that. They hear that. If you look at them with contempt, if you have a stare where you're just like, you're such troublemakers. Your kids end up in a place of fight or flight because they know that they are already in or headed to a place where they're going to be humiliated by you. They know whether you're about to give them gentle guidance or some kind of sharp public shame and exposure. And that is going to affect your relationship with them directly, but also it's going to shape how they feel about being honest and how they interpret and experience recovery and trust, self-trust and trust of you. Are you going to guide them or are you going to give them contempt? Because remember, your voice becomes their self-talk. So if you talk to them with contempt, their self-talk becomes self-contempt. If they have a sad day and you mock them, if everything gets more overly moralized, if when they get angry, you just act like they're such a horrible person, if they experience some kind of overwhelming emotion, and you're just like, you are so insolent. What you're teaching them is that kids, when you have a struggle, when you have an inner struggle, you have a bad day, you know what you need to do with it? You need to hide it because I don't want to see it. That's not safe. Kids need to learn that they don't need to hide from you. Not physically, not psychologically, emotionally. Hard moments in your family's life, they can either end in dread or they can end in safety and repair. And when your kids learn that they can survive the strain, because repairs is what this, when we're done this conversation, this relationship will be safe. It will stay safe throughout. It will end in safety. It will end in repair. Then they don't have to have some kind of lingering dread. They're not waiting for the second blow. They're not waiting for you to turn your cold stare even colder. They're not looking for the next round of punishment. They don't expect some kind of silent treatment. They need to know that you're not handling them as a problem. You're seeing them as a person. And young kids feel this very quickly. They see your posture. They hear your tone. You say to them either, you are a human, a lovely, wonderful, totally fine human, normal human, having a hard time today. Or you say, you're an irritation, you're a disruption, you're a moral headache, and I need to control you. I'm so ashamed of you. What's the self-talk going to be? The way you talk to them is their self-talk. The way you talk to them today is their self-talk tomorrow. We know that. We know that because that's what's happened to us. Some stress is ordinary. Some stress can even help our growth. But, chronic fear is what we're talking about. Chronic shame, chronic unpredictability, chronic harshness, chronic emotional coldness. Kids feeling always like they're being suspected of doing something wrong. When we do that to our kids, we are putting our children's nervous systems on high alert. And this is where you as a parent and we as families can truly say, I'm going to break this chain. I'm going to break this curse, so to speak. I don't want you to think to yourself that I'm sending a message of you're too sensitive, you're too reactive, you're too dramatic, you're too difficult. And you definitely don't want to be saying mean things like you're a pain, or you're a bad person. Your child has adopted to living under too much tension. Your child has adapted and it's going to keep adapting to living under too much tension, just like you do. And we want them to know that we hear it, we see it, and we don't want to erupt. We don't want to blame the child for the strain that we perhaps were unable to protect them from or see. Our kids are bearing incredible weights, and they reveal the pressure, and then they get treated like a problem too often. The symptoms appear, and we as parents, we miss the source. And our task is not just stopping the immediate noise. It's producing a situation where we can first self-examine and eventually get to a point where we can say, my job here is to help my child return to safety, to slowly build inner tools for this hard moment and for the next one. What is my child? I'm going to say it again, like I've said it several of these points. What is my child carrying right now? What has today demanded of them? What in this home makes them feel steady? And what, if anything, is jolting them out of their place of safety? What kind of presence am I offering? And what kind of presence are you offering when they fall apart? Am I adding weight to a very overloaded young person, or am I helping them find stability again? If we are willing to understand that safety is primary for them, safety, the presence of you calmly being steady, focused on their dignity and on building trust, if they can sense that in these hard moments, that these hard moments can be survived and they can be understood and worked through, where the child can learn, I'm struggling here, but through this, and when it's all over, I am held gently and tightly in my parents' hands. What a beautiful gift. What a beautiful gift. What a beautiful gift to give to kids. I'm going to read a few comments before I go to the next section. I'm an hour and 45. I'm probably going to go a little bit past 2 hours. I know you all can't probably stay for the whole 2 hours, some of you, but for whatever you can stay for, I appreciate it. Feel free to watch the rest of it if you'd like to. See here. Shell says, if you've never heard of them, check out Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the circle of courage. Yeah. If you're experiencing wild swings in mood as a parent, you need to seek help. Yeah, for sure. And a lot of people, arguably, they truly do experience that, and a lot of it is in many ways because of their kids are pushing their buttons, and realizing that we're all, in a sense, in this together. We all need to learn how to regulate ourselves and be. If you have wild swings as a parent, that's a problem. Kids, when you are calm, your kids really, 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 like, there's a palpable difference to me. I love the fact that when I was a Christian, I did do spanking, and I've talked about that many times here, so I don't want to get off track too much. But when I, many years ago, took that completely out of the equation, there was never a sense of you're disobedient, you're getting a spanking. I think there was a short transition period where they were still at times under a small level of fight or flight because they didn't quite know. But there was a point where it was almost palpable. You could see, like, that it had clicked. And I put it this way: there was a point where it clicked that they knew that no matter how much they pushed my buttons, that any physical assaults were just not an option. It was not going to be. It was not like, well, I'm probably not going to spank you, but if you push it really hard, I'm going to give you a couple of warnings, but I'm going to try my best to stay away from that level. But if you push hard enough, there's going to be a point at which I'm going to justify in my mind spanking, physical abuse, because you're so bad you just need it to pull yourself back, and to say to myself at a certain point, or say to them effectively, that's not an option. It's not going to be an option. It's not an option now. It's not going to be an option. It's off the table. It's completely off the table. You could palpably see the difference where their fight or flight literally just like dropped radically. I could see it probably within a month or two after spanking was just off the table. And I told them, like, I'm never going to spank you again. Doesn't matter. You could not do anything bad enough to deserve a spanking. Never. But that's a big deal. It's a big deal. You see the difference. So Amy's, it was odd. Despite getting straight A's, I was pale with dark circles under the eyes, never smiled and never laughed. I knew all the correct performative answers. Yeah, I could do that in many ways. It's hard. It's hard to realize that that's in many ways what we grew up under, and that in many ways we are truly inviting ourselves to reparent ourselves through this. Love this, Tim. Did you find some resources on these topics, or do some therapy to help explore these issues? I feel like I've been thinking about these issues from a million different angles for years. I feel like in some ways I wish I could write a book on parenting. Just the ability to move past any corporal punishment and the ability to see their safety as primary it's radically transformed my mind. I'm not there yet, for sure. None of us are, but it's keeping me on a much better trajectory, I believe. I want to focus for a couple minutes on this. I want to speed up what I'm saying because I feel like I'm probably taking a little bit longer than I meant to. But the nervous system lens changes the order of operations. The nervous system lens changes the order of operations. So when you learn that regulation has to come before reasoning, it will eventually become one of the biggest shifts you're going to make. And it's going to spare your kids so much needless issues and shame. But a kid that's flooded, that's just dealing with, oh, you're too dramatic, you're too whatever, disobedient, you're too much. The reality, the deeper reality, is often much simpler and much sadder. When their system is overwhelmed, thinking and rationality slips out of reach. A child is not able to figure out what words to say, to sort their words. They're not able to weigh the options. They're not able to hold the rules in their mind very well. They're not able to recover quickly. When a child is flooded, they can't hear your lecture. They can't hear you giving your moral speech in those hot moments. There's a power struggle. Even if you don't think there is, in their mind, if there is a power struggle, it is pouring fuel on a fire that's already burning. And what they need is not more, these are the hard rules and obey, obey, obey. What they need is a calm context in which you can help them get back within that realm of thinking and listening and learning. But they can't get there unless the nervous system lens changes for them and for you. First is steadiness, and then connection, and then guidance. And we often reverse that order. Harsh systems like Christianity reverse that order. They try to force you to learn or comply through pressure. But pressure can drive a child further from the very skills that the adult is, demanding. Co-regulation matters. It really does. It means the steadier your nervous system can be, then you, as the one with the steadier system, can help the people that are under the stress. And the steadier person will help the distressed person. You become part of the child's path back towards solid ground. You don't want to be another alarm bell in their heads. You don't want to be collecting evidence of how bad they are. You want to be a guide and the way that they get grounded. A calm adult, they're going to get steady and they're going to get calm, but you're lending your steadiness, you're lending your calmness to a child when their inner state is kind of out of control and spiraling. What you need is fewer words, far fewer words, lower volume, a slower space. Yes, clear boundaries for sure, but a more calm, loving, empathetic, benevolent, gracious, grounded face. They need less threats in the room. They need steadiness, but no threats. They need physical closeness sometimes. Again, I've talked about how sometimes I'll just come up to my son and just give him a little background, just real gentle, just for a second. And one of the things I do, I think that helps those moments in advance is whenever I walk by my kids, I'll just give them a little background. Just, maybe they're at the computer, they're watching playing a game, or they're watching something, and maybe they had a little snack, and their dirty bowl is empty, and I'm gonna come get it to put it in the kitchen to eventually wash it. I'll come over, grab the bowl, I'll just give them a quick back rub, just 3 seconds. A little rub, hey, love you, hope you're having a great day. I do that constantly, all day. I do it 50, 100 times with them, all of them. They get a little bit micro back rub, a little touch on the shoulder. Hey, so proud of you. Hey, I love you. Hey, it's so good to be with you. They get those all the time, so that when it's a bigger situation where where it really needs to have like a longer, let's sit together and put my arm around you, they're already used to that my hands are calm, my hands are safe, my hands are always places of gentleness. They've already experienced that 100 times. Now this is just, we're adapting the gentleness to a situation where it's more intense. Sometimes space does help. Sometimes you just need a bit of cake. Let's just take some space here. We'll come back to it in a few minutes. Maybe they need a snack. Maybe it's simple as like their blood sugar or whatever. Maybe they need movement. Sometimes it feels like the kids are they're sitting still. They're in the same chair too long. Maybe going back to Daniel Tiger for a minute, maybe they need the warning of a transition that, hey, 2 minutes. You got 2 minutes to wrap up. We're going to bed soon. Or, hey, do one last thing. We're leaving the playground. Do one last thing. Don't just be like, hey, we're leaving right now. Like they need that transition. But overarchingly, whatever the tools in your toolbox end up becoming. They need a simple presence, a calm, accepting, loving presence. They do not need a stream of correction. If someone was to watch your family for a day or a week, and all that they sense is you are one endless stream of correction and one endless stream of messages to them that they are disappointing you and bad, it's not going to work. We can read psychology books and watch videos all day long. Sometimes some of the wisest responses we're going to have are going to look deceptively simple. Just have a softer face, a softer voice, a hand held out in gentleness. Um, you don't need to escalate every speech. Sometimes just giving them love will change everything about it. And what's amazing is that you only have a few years, really, to build this connection. Because by the time they're teenagers, if you have created distance, you're not going to suddenly rebuild it. You're not going to be able to rethink all these things later. They need years worth when they're little, hopefully, preferably, when, long before they're slipping into teenage years and early adulthood, they need to know that you are and have been a gentle person who has a gentle tone, gentle pacing, a gentle posture, a gentle, loving face, and that when there's issues, you always you lower the temperature. You do not drive it higher on purpose. You are not coddling your children to do co-regulation. You are engaging in skilled guidance. You're not indulging them. You're not surrendering to their bad behavior. This is a form of adult leadership. You want to take your panic and your cruelty out of the equation. You want to say, I'm here, I'm steady, I'm going to keep this line in place where we are going to be always going back to, you're okay, I love you, I'm just here to help. Children learn this. They learn self-regulation when they have repeated experiences of being helped back into self-regulation. Adults, parents who think that the self-regulation should just appear in full form in these kids when they're 8 years old or 10 years old, just because you did the command, you had this sheer force of, I told you to do it this way. You're demanding fruit from roots that never got a chance to grow, and you didn't even help them grow. Young people can grow this inner stability that we want. There's going to be these cycles of strain, of whatever disobedience you want to call it, strained relationships. You respond with gentleness, support, recovery, and you repeat, rinse and repeat. This is how capacities get stronger. They get built. When your child has help from you to name their feelings, when your child has help to pause on purpose, to shift gears gently, to recover after a disappointment, to move through shame without being more shamed, to come back after they've been overloaded. They are slowly building the skills with you together that you wish they had, but you're doing it. Instead of demanding it, you're helping them build it layer by layer, little layer, little layer by little layer. I love those desserts you sometimes get where, the chef, the baker has to do like 10, 20 layers of something. Have you ever had those? It's like the puff pastry, just like micro layers, little layer of dough that's just flattened out so much. And this little layer of Nutella, little layer of cream, and they just do it and do it and do it. And it's so amazing. That's what you're doing. You're creating little micro layers that add up over time. You're saying, I am here. I am steady. I am here to help you find your footing. And in many ways, what we're talking about again is a lens. It's asking us to go beyond the behavior problems and to ask good questions. When you have a behavior only lens, you're basically saying, this is a problem. How do I stop it? This is a problem. How do I totally shift gears here for them? This has to end right now. But when you're getting more into the awareness of their state as children, what you're saying again is what's happening inside their heart, their emotions, their psychology right now. We don't want to rush toward a verdict. We want to slow down and understand this scene, understand the context. Is my child flooded? Are they settled or not? What has changed? What load have they been having all day? Your kids are going to ask for help, but it's going to be in forms that are very messy. It's going to be very messy. If your kids are in a state, if you could really, if they could just talk like an adult and express themselves, they had all the vocabulary. If you knew what was really going on and they could say to you, I'm at a point of utter collapse and I need your help. That's easier to grasp, but that's what they are saying. Their behavior is saying, I'm at a point of collapse and I need your help. They're making a bid for connection. It's a very rough bid, but there are warning signs of their overload. Maybe it's signs that your boundaries need to be clear. Some of this is just on us, but we don't want to fall into the trap that we did so pervasively as Christians, where we ask children for more than their young nervous systems can possibly carry. We want to do that because we will save our children from being morally crushed because they're going to go through cycle upon cycle of their nervous system being in a state of crisis. We want to teach ourselves as parents. We are not going to reach out to them out of our old fears. We have these inherited reflexes that interrupt us so much from being a good parent. These inherited reflexes where we were tempted to think of it as rebellion and you're guilty, even long after deconstruction. We're not here to indict their character. We're not here to say, your roughest moments when you lash out at me, when you disobey me, that's the truest thing about you. You're just a bad kid. Kids will remember. They'll remember the difference between when you as a parent meet their crisis with an intense accusation and you as a parent help them find their way back home to themselves, back to safety. Back to safety. That's what we're doing. See here. Amy Collins says, are you speaking of Daniel the Striped Tiger? Yeah. No, I was thinking more of the cartoon, the newer version, but yeah, he originally started with Mr. Rogers. Yeah, Daniel Tiger is amazing. My kids are old enough that they don't see them much. It's amazing. They love certain shows until they're like, oh, that's a baby show, and then they won't watch it. There's one on Disney called PJ Masks. They loved it for years and years and years. All of a sudden, they're all like, we don't even remember that. And I showed them, like, you guys used to love this. Just like 6 months ago, you'd watch it. I showed it to them. They're like, we don't remember that show. And that's a baby show. It's funny. But Daniel Tiger, again, it's a kid's show. It's also an adult show. Same with Bluey. I want to get into, for a minute, gentle parenting. I'm not going to bring up a title for this one. I'm just going to kind of explain it more. But, when we look at gentle parenting, a lot of us, I think, get tempted to think that gentle parenting is saying, I just want to be permissive, overly permissive. Let anything goes. There's just, there's sometimes people think of gentle parenting as just like, gentle parenting as a whole is just, I'm just not going to beat my kids. I'm not going to beat them. I'm not going to hit them. That is a part of it for sure, but that does not mean the same thing as permissiveness. You can be a parent that is fully vested in gentle parenting and still have a spine. We're not talking about passive parenting. I think gentle parenting can get a bad rap, especially, there are people that cave, whenever the child gets loud, and we don't want that caricature to miss the point. There's a deep confusion that sometimes happens with gentle parenting. People see gentleness and they assume that the parent is being weak, and they assume that you're surrendering to your kid's bad behavior. They see a parent that's trying to understand their kid's inner state, and they think, well, you're basically saying your kid runs your home. Your kid's now in charge. That's not what we're saying. Healthy gentleness is different. It's a very different paradigm. We're looking for steadiness in the midst of the pressure. We're looking for emotional maturity, and we're looking for the ability to hold the boundaries while a kid is upset or falling apart. But we're going to have a spine. We're going to have a spine. We're going to have boundaries. We're going to have a center of gravity as people who focus on gentle parenting. We're going to carry adult leadership that is grounded and is not rude or mean or accusatory. We don't need to intimidate our children to prove ourselves. We don't. Gentle parenting is going to say your feelings as a child are real, but also my limits as a parent who has to parent you and has to have boundaries, that's also real. The gentleness we're looking for is going to say, I want to stop the aggression, but also things like property matters. You can't go bust your siblings' toys apart. There's safety matters. You can't touch their bodies in ways that are harmful. It's important to say you're sorry. It's important to follow through. I will still lead you. I'm still the parent. I will not renege my responsibility as a parent. I will hold the line. I will guide the room. I am in charge. But we want wise authority. We want gentle authority. We're not looking to be passive, but we're saying really two things at the same time. We're saying to kids, your inner storm is real. And I fully acknowledge it. Your inner storm is real. And I will meet you there. But my boundaries as your parent are also real. I care about your distress, and I care about keeping your siblings safe. Your feelings will get plenty of room. We'll explore your feelings. Your willingness to harm other people will not. There are boundaries here. We're not going to avoid conflict like passive parenting might try to do. We're not going to lose that line. We're not going to drift. We're not going to cave to every child's immediate intensity. We're not going to try to escape the discomfort of the room by just caving. We're not trying to center our discomfort as the main thing, like, oh, if I can just get my child to stop screaming and just give them whatever they want, that'll save my, frustration. That's not what we're going for. Your child's development is still front and center. Gentle parenting can look similar to passive parenting to outsiders if you're not looking carefully. But I want to make the difference more obvious, and I hope it's already obvious, but I'm just going to state it. You're trying to stay emotionally present while also guiding these hard moments. We're not slipping out of leadership, hoping that the moment burns itself out. We're trying to build trust through clarity, but also through empathy. We're not trying to just drift through the confusion and hope it turns out okay. It's not what we're doing. We're not going to let our children's intensity dominate or steer the context of the home. We're going to stay present and we're going to stay steady. We're going to hold our boundaries, but we're also going to be in tune with our kids. We're going to become part of our children's return to the safety and the steadiness we're talking about. Passive parents are going to get swept downstream in all this mess. We're going to be a strong, to carry the river motif, we're going to be a strong bank that a child can press against and feel safe there. I hope that is not something that you're confusing. I hope you don't see gentle parenting as overly permissive. A passive parent might avoid disciplining children because discipline can feel mean. If you're a gentle parent, you understand discipline is part of teaching. And I'm not talking about corporal punishment, by the way. We're looking to have a healthy frame for our discipline where we're guiding them. We're doing repetition. We're having structure. We're figuring out how to safely repair relationships when there's been an issue. We are looking as well to have a way to help your kids understand honesty is important, empathy is important, flexibility is important, and they're accountable for their actions. We are going to help them through all this. It's not just, it's not just that we want to stop the hard moments and say, stop screaming, stop hitting your siblings. We're trying to tolerate them, but we're also going to keep them in line. Children may hate the limits that we set. Children may truly hate the limits that we set. But I think, and they may even rage against it. They may scream against it. They may sob and shout, accuse. They may bargain. They may collapse under the limit. But that doesn't make your boundaries unwise. Doesn't mean you need to take your boundaries away, obviously. Sometimes your child's anger is just their frustration meeting the reality of that. And you as a good parent can survive their anger. But what we're not trying to do in this is say, we see your anger at the boundary, and therefore I'm going to resort to very harsh parenting because I want to crush your behavior quickly. I want to intimidate you. I want to humiliate you by my sheer force. I'm bigger than you. I'm older than you. We want to teach, we want to regulate, we want to co-regulate, we want to guide, we want to preserve their dignity while keeping our boundaries. We're not looking for compliance at almost any cost. We're looking at true growth, true trust, true building of skills. Passive parenting might say, how do I stop this situation really quickly? I just want this over. We're not going for that. We're trying to say, how can I help them to grow? I don't want visible control. I want long-term internal formation. I don't want quick silence. I don't want the issue to just, snap my fingers and it goes away. I want them to have those tools we talked about so that even when I'm not there, when the parent's out of sight, that they can still remain strong and do the right thing. This is important, very important. You could say, in a sense, to your kids, I hear that you're angry. I hear that you're furious. And I'm moving your hands away from your sibling. You're not allowed to hit them. And I'm staying right here. We're going to get through this. We're going to come back to what happened. But I'm not going to be passive. I'm going to be steady. You don't say all that, obviously, but you say that with your tone. You say that with your eyes. You say it with your words in part. But you're teaching them your feelings are survivable. Your hands are still my business. Other people matter. You can't hit your siblings. And you're effectively saying with your actions, these moments are moments when we will move together toward accountability. Kids can learn accountability. They can learn, that you are a true leader. And it's emotionally costly because you have to stay grounded while they are losing it. You're going to leave room for consequences as long as the consequences are staying connected to safety and, and repair. The kid may lose access to something like a toy for a while. They need to help fix something. Maybe your sibling was building something with blocks and they kicked it over. Now they have to fix what they damaged. They have to return. They have to apologize. They have to clean up, make amends. But the whole process is aimed at teaching and connection instead of shaming. And we're not looking as parents, again, where our main focus is domination. Gentleness has a lot more rigor than sometimes the critics will admit. You have to regulate yourself first. You have to read your child's state correctly. You have to stay clear. You have to stay calm enough to think. You have to figure out if your child is ready for a conversation or if they're too flooded with emotions. Maybe you have to talk about it, talk it through later. It's easy as adults to be impulsive with our harshness. Gentleness is a craft. It's an art and a craft. And for parents coming out of severe religious settings, that is revolutionary. Love has to sound sharp to be serious, is what we felt like we were thinking Christianity. Control proves you're faithful to God and as a parent. And your child's tears are proof that it's working. And that's not true. And so when you begin to parent gently, it can feel terrifying at first, like you're letting your kid run your home. And there'll be days you don't get everything right, and that's okay. But, it feels like this is like you're in a battle, and this is your weapon. Your weapon is your control. Your weapon is your fierceness. Your weapon may be spanking. And you can't win this battle without those weapons. But you learn that that's not true. Your child can face firm boundaries and still your relationship with them can be one where you are holding them emotionally. Your authority, which you do need to have, we're not looking for you to renege on your authority or your responsibility, but your authority and true tenderness and gentleness and empathy can live together in the same home, in the same room. They really can. I think I'm going to have to make this two different. Oops, I left a comment up. My bad. I'm going to have to make this two different presentations. I've got so much more I want to say, and I'm afraid this could be 4 hours, so I don't want to do that to you all. I'm going to read a few comments and chop it off here. Again, I'm sorry. I apparently have more to say than I thought I did. But it's good. These are good things. These are good things. We need to be reminded. We're going through it. Like I said, I started saying we're going to go through this slowly. I think we need to keep this in the forefront of our mind. So we'll do this again shortly. We'll go through a few more thoughts. Gentle parenting takes so much more work. It starts with making sure your kiddo is set up to succeed, redirecting them gently, giving them time to regulate and make the right choice. Thank you, Amy, so much. Yeah, agreed, Shel, so much. I will 100% be the first to admit I don't always have the energy to approach every situation through the gentle parenting lens. Yeah, we all struggle. My own disabilities are physically, mentally draining. It's hard. Yeah. What you're describing is authoritative, but not authoritarian, not permissive. Permissiveness is neglectful. Yeah. And don't forget, follow the same rules you gently enforce. Yeah. Yeah. Good reminders. Yeah. We need to be the kind of people that live by example. And that example is not just in terms of the rules, but also the tone. If you expect the kids to be nice to their siblings, they need to show gentleness. Then you need to show gentleness. I do. We need to learn self-control. In many ways, Christianity gave us a carte blanche to be so out of control, so nasty. I mean, I know, the Duggar stuff where they say, you put your baby, it was a young baby, just a baby that's just old enough to crawl. You put them on a blanket and you say, stay on that blanket. And long before they understand all the words, the minute they get off the blanket, you give them a swat or something or pinch, make them feel the pain until they stay on that blanket and they eventually learn. Christianity gives you a chance to feel morally in the right when you are acting like a monster to your own children. It's insane. It's crushing. It's sad. It's so needless. But we're basically saying to ourselves, we can be better people. From this point on, we can be better people than we've ever been. You just have to take a moment to say, I've been doing it wrong. I've been really wrong. Eat humble pie. We all had to do it when we were Christians, escaping. Say, I was dead wrong about Christianity. As a corollary, we need to be able to admit I may have been dead wrong about how I parent my kids. It's so hard to do it. It's so hard to take these steps because, some of us, perhaps even your kids are older, and it might be a situation where you need to apologize or talk through it with your older kids and say, hey, I wish I would have done it differently. But I encourage you to think through it. Think through what to say and how to do this differently. I especially encourage you, if you are hitting your children, please stop. Please stop hitting your children. I know it feels like in many ways like they'll be out of control if I don't spank them. Please rethink this. I don't care if the state you live in says it's okay. If you would not do it to an adult as a way of dealing with their mistreating you, don't do it to a child. Please do not spank children. Please do not hit children. Please do not pinch children. Please do not do anything to their bodies. Their bodies need to be so safe with you. And honestly, you will be planting seeds of trust and safety and autonomy and safety in their own skin and just the respect that their body is intact in every which way. We say to ourselves as deconverted people, I want my children to have thought autonomy. I want them to be able to look at the claims of Christianity and Buddhism and Islam. I don't want to hide that from them. I want them to be able to grow up and be exposed to all the information. And then pick whatever they feel is right for them. They want to be an atheist, great. They want to be a Christian, great. It's their life. It's their choice. I need to step away. I don't own them. I don't own their brain. I don't own their thoughts. I don't own their worldview. They are their own person. In a very similar parallel way, you don't own their body. They are their own person, their own body. Step away from the edge of saying, I have the right and the authority and the need to hit them. Please stop hitting your children. Please. I beg of you. All of us can do better. And if you don't hit your kids, but you hit your kids with words, all of us need the reminders. Pull it back. Pull it back. Empathy and gentleness matter on all levels of life, but especially your kids. And when they have years upon years upon years of you having that example, years of safety, years of gentleness, years of tenderness, years of saying, I see past your bad behavior. I see the real you that's aching inside. I see you that's had a rough day at work, at school. You've had a rough day at, whatever, with the kids and your teacher, and something's not right. You didn't get good enough sleep. You didn't get the right foods, whatever. Something's off here. You give them that mentality where you become a student of their ability to thrive, whatever it takes for them to feel safe and thrive. And you're a professional student of them. Man, you're planting seeds that will grow into a beautiful tree, beautiful garden. They will look back. They won't remember everything. They obviously won't remember everything you did, but they'll remember a million little moments when you came up to them and gave them a back rub, when they were being arguably rude or obnoxious, disobedient, unhelpful. And instead of berating them, you were just as gentle as you could find it in your heart to be. They will remember. You will be building so many emotional, psychological memories. You will be their safe place. You will be their safe place. I want to bring up a link that I want to end with. I'm not going to play this, but I would encourage you, if you could, when you are done, to go watch this. Now I'm going to finish with the song that I started with. But bear with me one second while I find this. This is a song called I Will Be Your Peace. This is from my Harmonic Super Kids channel. If you would, please watch that when we're done, just for a minute. I encourage you, please be your children's peace. Please be your children's peace. A few last comments, then we'll again watch that video, the 30-second video of this song, and then we'll be done. Yeah, agreeing with Amy there, and this could be a whole series for sure, and we'll probably revisit it several times over the next couple months. But we need that community as parents as well, like you said, especially after what we came out of. That's that Pearl book, Train Up a Child book. We were adjacent to. Our church didn't necessarily follow them, but some people in our church did. Michael and Debbie Pearl, that blanket thing is so messed up. Making parenting about bringing children into subjection before God is so awful. Once you get down that road, it just opens up so much more potential for abuse. Those poor Duggar kids, their parents got what they wanted. They got this perfect-looking little family, but a lot of good that did. Yeah, we see so much the true outcome of that mentality. Well, I just want to say thank you again to all of you for being a part of this today. Went longer than I thought, but this was good stuff. We'll come back to probably at least one more, if not two more, for this specific small series. But I think it's helpful. We'll do a very quick recap when we start again, and then we'll go into the second half of it. If it's 3 parts, that's fine. But I think 2 parts for now will do. But we'll go as well into bringing some of these topics into one of the live streams where it's open mic, where I just kind of introduce this, and then you all come on and talk about your thoughts on it, which I look forward very much to hearing. But thank you all so much. I'm going to play this again. This video is about 1 minute and 20 seconds, and then we'll wrap up with the rest of the ending of the live stream. Thank you so much. I'll see you hopefully tonight. Today we loved each other well. Today we loved each other well. Loved each other well. Loved each other well. Today we loved each other well. Today we blessed each other well. Today we blessed each other well. Blessed each other well. Blessed each other well. Today we blessed each other well. Today we forgave each other well. Today we forgave each other well. Forgave each other well. Forgave each other well. Today we forgave each other well. Today we laughed together well. Today we laughed together well. Laughed together well. Laughed together well. Today we laughed together well. Today we loved each other well. Today we loved each other well. Loved each other well. Loved each other well. Today we loved each other well.